So in this video, we're going to show you how to retarget humanoid animations. We're going to bring in this farmer boy with no materials yet. We'll do materials in a subsequent video, but we're going to show you that we can retarget the current animations that we have for Ethan onto this farmer boy so that you are using a custom mesh. So I'll see you in there. All right, just before we start, I'm noticing an SADFA folder sitting here. Of course, it's got nothing in it, so it can be deleted. In my case, always tidy up as you go along is the moral of that simple story. So we have provided you with another asset pack. Let's go find it. It is sitting against this video as per the rest of your resources, and it's called Hero Character. Now, if we just bring that in, then it's going to put it in the blends and FBX. We're, by the way, going to be moving away from a blends and FBX. We're going to actually put all our Blender files and FBX alongside our world objects later, but for now, we'll leave them where they are. So let's go ahead and import the hero. So the general idea here is that you can import any humanoid character that has a compatible skeleton with Ethan that you like. So we've provided you one, our hero, but of course, we need you to be making your game. And our hero is very much just an early hero at this stage. But I'm going to show you the process of getting a humanoid character into your game. That's the important thing. I'm going to encourage you in the challenge, which will be coming up, to actually import your own character that either you've made, maybe pop over to the Blender course and work out how to make your own character, or maybe you go and buy one off the asset store. Maybe you use our hero, but it would be better if you are actually building your own game here, of course. So once we've got this character imported, we're using blend files. You will need Blender installed. Blender, of course, is free. Let me just show you where to go and get Blender. I'm sure you've worked this out by now, or you won't have got this far in the course, but go and get yourself Blender. As long as it's installed, then Unity will be able to deal natively with blend models, which is cool. So here it is. You've got a hero.blend file. Let's talk about how we import this. I'm going to open up the tray and look at the import settings. So the model settings in general, we don't need to go into too much detail about that. Any well set up humanoid model, you can just leave the defaults. The rig, though, that's a little bit important. The animation type needs to be humanoid so that Unity understands it's a humanoid skeleton that it's dealing with. So under the blend file or the FBX import, you go into Inspector, Rig, Humanoid. The other thing is we're going to create the avatar definition. This is the avatar here. We're going to create the avatar definition from the model. And if you click, well, firstly, before you click Configure, notice a little tick. That means Unity has looked at this skeletal mesh and decided that the skeleton is something it can deal with. So if you click Configure, then if it's working well, then what you have is this. This is what's been created by Mikey in our case, our very basic hero dude. Now you're just seeing a untextured outer mesh at the moment. You're seeing on the left-hand side the skeleton. By the way, just in case you missed it, the way I got to this was Hero, Inspector, and then I clicked on Configure next to the import settings. So this is showing that it has recognized all the key points of the skeleton, basically just by their relationship to one another, the hip being the core root bone, and all these other points. These points in green here are the points that are essential in order for Unity to deal with it as a humanoid mesh, and the ones with the dotted kind of gray outline are the optional parts, okay? So we've got a fairly complete skeleton, but it hasn't got all the hand and feet bones and stuff in it. All right, so when you finish with that, you can just click Done. You don't actually have to make any changes. You shouldn't with our model anyway. In some instances, you may, depending on which model you're bringing in, need to go to Rig, Avatar Definition, Configure, and actually hand feed it which each of these transforms are. So you may actually have all the right bones, but for some reason, Unity may not recognize it. But if your model is sufficiently standard in its skeletal layout, then Unity will auto-match it. All right, the other thing is we're not going to import animations on the Import Animation tab because we already have an animation for Ethan, of course. What we're trying to do here, the whole purpose of this, as I explained at the beginning, is to retarget the current animations that we have for Ethan onto our new player. So that is that bit. We've covered the first bit of the video, which is the import settings. Once he's imported, what we should be able to do is drop the hero into the scene like this and see him standing in a scarecrow pose or a standard T-pose. The T-pose is for the modelers when they're working on this thing. It allows them to get under the armpits and things like that and actually put the detail where they need to. Maybe he should have his legs wider, but I'm not sure artists are that worried about crotch detail, so we can leave that out. So that's a standard T-pose. That's a normal thing. And it comes with its own armature. Well, let's go look at it. So what I've done is I've instantiated a instance of the mesh into the scene. Comes out as hero here, and we can look at it. It's got its own armature, which is its skeletal layout, and it's the same structurally as Ethan's skeletal layout, and that's important for the animation retargeting, but it's got completely different names, and that actually doesn't matter because Unity has already recognized, remember when we looked at the import settings, it's already recognized which bones are which. And then we have a hero mesh, which is a skinned mesh renderer. So how do we move these things across? Well, I'm going to just do it now. You either do yours as you watch me, or you wait for the challenge, and the challenge is just going to be do this with a character of your own. So what I've got is I've got the player in the scene sitting here, and then I've got the hero also instantiated in the scene. And what I'm going to do with my player, I'm going to open him up, and I'm going to ditch his body, glasses, and skeleton. All of those things are going to go. It's going to remind me it's going to break the prefab instance. That's fine. We just have a mental note that once we've got the player working again, that we're going to need to overwrite the current player prefab instance, or the player prefab. Okay, so then what I do is I just go and grab from this instantiated dude here, this hero, his armature and his mesh. So armature and hero. I could call hero mesh. Be less confusing. There you go. So I grab his armature and his mesh and drop it into the player. And it's going to break the prefab instance of the player or the hero. That's fine, doesn't matter. It's only the player that we care about. Okay, so now we have this thing called a player. Now, first thing you're going to notice is that the player's root is here. You see the capsule collider, and the hero's off to the side. So we need to sort that out. So your armature component should have an offset of 0, 0, 0 to start with. We'll move that in a minute if necessary. And the mesh should also have an offset of 0, 0, 0. Now, the guy's buried in the ground. So grab your armature offset and just move him until his feet are touching the ground. You may want them to depress into the ground a tiny bit, depends on the state of your ground. So let's just, whether it's soft ground, hard ground, etc. So 0.78 I'm going to go with my guy, and then that just means he looks right. All right, so the key is that the capsule collider is still sitting inside the guy. Actually, with the size of this hero, that capsule collider could actually do with a bit of a increase in size, but we'll worry about that in a sec. Let's just see how we're doing. So he can't move. Something's wrong with the skeleton. Something's really wrong. So what do we need to do next? So you click on the player. You've replaced these parts. Now we need to tell it that it's a different avatar for a start. So this is on the player under the animator. It's currently still using Ethan avatar. So we're going to go use the hero avatar. Now let's see what effect that's had. Quite a lot better, right? So it's really important that that step is done as well. The player under the animator needs to tell it to use the hero's avatar, not Ethan's avatar. And once we've done that, then in my instance, this is working fine. And hopefully it'll also work fine for you. We've got funny gizmos on there, but here he is running around. Now he's missing any materials that we might want to put on him. And we can provide you those materials in another video. We don't want to get caught up with like, how do you put materials on this guy? He has got in his mesh, if you look at the shader, I think you'll find somewhere, skinned mesh renderer. What do we got material-wise? Materials. So I'm going into the mesh of the hero, skin mesh renderer component materials. You see he's got 4 separate material slots. Now we haven't yet provided you with those materials, and that's fine. We don't want you distracted messing around with materials, but he will come out looking a lot more interesting with a straw hat and some strange colored pants on. But the point is right now, for this video, that we just get him moving. So that's basically what I want you to do. The final test of this, of course, is to create your new player prefab. Now, if you're confident, you can overwrite the current player prefab like this by dragging the player from the scene over it. And if you're not confident, then we'll just create a new prefab temporarily, but do tidy up after yourself. Final thing we want to test is that the new player prefab can be dropped into the scene, that he sits on the ground, that the colliders look all right. And I would argue actually that I want to increase the height of this collider a little bit. And I'm just going to look down, see at the bottom of the capsule, and I'm just going to move the Y position of the collider up a tad, just to fit the kind of size of the new model. Apply this back to the prefab. So a final check that our player will instantiate properly. Going to grab the player prefab, drop him in the scene. All the colliders look good. You may wonder what this second outer volume is, by the way. If you're not sure what that second cylindrical volume is, try turning components off, and you'll find that it's to do with the nav mesh agent, all right? And that's the nav mesh agent's stopping distance, I believe, or is it its radius? It's the radius of the nav mesh agent. That's that second green thing you're seeing. But you drop it in the scene, and crucially, it works. Now, if for some reason it doesn't work, it may be that you've lost your player tag or whatever, but watch the video carefully, persevere, and see if you can change out your model to a new skeleton. That would be great. And by the way, if you don't like him sliding around like this, then you perhaps don't want a zero friction material, but maybe we want rubber on his feet. So on the player, under the capsule collider where you have 0 friction, I'm going to just put rubber there instead, then the dude, and apply it back to the prefab, and then the dude won't keep sliding so much at the end. Now, final thing for me to do before I put you into the final bit of the video, which is your challenge, is just to go to Rick's Village, Saving my changes, just making sure that the player in there, because the prefab has changed, the player has indeed changed. Now, Rick may have something to say about the fact this player is a bit bigger, but we'll see what he's got to say about it. All right, let's pop you into the challenge. Import a new player model. Player should instantiate on the ground when you put them in. Player can run around the scene as before. This is the specifications of your challenge. The player collides as expected with the scenery, and use our model, your own model, or an asset from an asset store. Go ahead, integrate that, and maybe drop us a quick screenshot in the Q&A. That would be great, of your player with a different mesh on it in the scene. I would love to see that. So go ahead, pause the video. I've already shown you how to do this, and I will actually see you in the next video.